For the full colour booklet accompanying this series, send a cheque for £2 payable to Carlton Television to Second World War in Colour, Box 8000, Birmingham B1 2JN.
Coming up, UN forces struggle to contain the violence in East Timor. Plus, can Europe hold on to the Ryder Cup? Join me.
It was the biggest manhunt in British criminal history.
It didn't matter whether they were innocent girls, prostitutes.
When all along the killer's identity lay hidden in police files.
It was a manual system and it was the only one available at the time.
Free to strike again.
For the rest of my life, I'll live with being a party to the wrong decision.
For the first time, the definitive inside story.
You are no nearer catching me now than 4 years ago when I started.
Manhunt, the search for the Yorkshire Ripper, Part 1, next Thursday.
Sort of warrior-like nature of Maori people.
Failure is not an option. It's going to war with each other.
Rugby is New Zealand, and New Zealand is rugby.
This country is extremely proud of that team.
Hacker, the legend of the All Blacks, Sunday at 3:10.
You can't always explain why you love something or lose it. You just do.
Doesn't mean it's wrong or right, it's just different.
Things should be black or white.
Never grey.
So be bold.
Don't be afraid.
And be yourself.
Stand up.
Stand out.
And be counted.
Cross the line.
Get off the fence!
Create something pure.
Better to provoke a reaction than none at all.
It's far better for some people to love something than everyone just to like it.
A car this extraordinary deserves far more than just an ordinary test drive. For your 24-hour test drive, call 0845 670 75.
Give your wash an Alpine freshness. With new Ariel Alpine tablets.
Because Campbell's cream of chicken soup is so thick and creamy, it's absolutely delicious. And you can use it to make really creamy chicken with mushrooms and bacon. Campbell's, deliciously thick and creamy.
Pilot G1.
Gel ink pens.
Serious style.
G1 gel ink pens from Pilot.
Ease up, everyone. It's all got to go.
This is it then, is it?
Yep, this is finally it.
Nice of you to join us, Nick.
Well, I couldn't miss it, could I, Mum? The Last Supper.
Yeah, you're allowed 3 mil more.
I think these walls once rang with the sound of
murder. What was that girl's name? Yeah, just stick it on the van.
Time to get.
Every 5 seconds, someone can splash out after winning £10 or more on National Lottery Instants. Anything can happen in an instant.
Be where the action is.
For another week of football in a different league.
I like to be.
Find out how Chelsea get on against Galatasaray in Tuesday night's highlights. Also featuring PSV's game with Rangers. And we're live on Wednesday.
Watch Manchester United defend their European crown.
They look as if they're really up for it.
As they take on Marseille. It's football in a different league.
The UEFA Champions League.
With highlights Tuesday at 10 and live Wednesday at 7:30.
ITV.
Paul Geldart, the former Conservative councillor and magistrate, who often called for the return of the death penalty, now finds his son in the dock, charged with the brutal murder of his own mother.
He must be punished, and justice must be shown. And I believe in that. He's got to be punished.
My son murdered his mother. It can only be real life.
Every week, a new film from Britain's best documentary makers. Monday at 10, ITV.
In Meridian News, a mother and her 2 children die in a house fire in Sussex. Join us after the ITV Nightly News.
The struggle to contain the violence in East Timor. Counting now in the Hamilton by-election. Gorbachev's emotional farewell to Raisa. And can Europe do it again in the Ryder Cup?
From ITN, the ITV Nightly News with Dermot Monahan.
Good evening. The commander of the small UN peacekeeping force in East Timor said he needed more troops urgently after shooting broke out today. It appeared to be shots in the air fired by Indonesian troops or militiamen, but Australian and British servicemen came close to opening fire themselves. The local Indonesian commander tonight put the incidents down to a misunderstanding. ITN's Julian Mannion saw what happened.
Suddenly, firing broke out in Dili, and the result was panic. It seemed that pro-Indonesian militiamen had opened fire, and near the scene, Australian troops screamed at a group of local men to put their hands up and get on the floor. In the confusion, an Australian armoured vehicle suddenly reversed. Nearby, more armour was called up on reports of suspicious men in green uniforms, but the Australians soon discovered they were friendly.
Who were these blokes down here? Gurkhas.
And there was another shooting incident, this time in the area of an Indonesian army base. British Special Forces troops clambered over the gates of the barracks to conduct a search, but they found nothing except an angry Indonesian soldier. "Don't do it again," he shouted.
Don't repeat again, okay? Don't repeat again.
No one was hurt in the shooting, which seems to have been directed in the air. But the UN commander acknowledges that the situation is not yet under control.
Well, things are out of hand, and that's why we're here. That uneasy calm on day one we always knew was going to, in some way, flare up.
The Indonesian army may not be resisting the UN, but it is still putting on a display of spite. Yet again, it's the result of anger and hatred. The Indonesian army may finally be pulling out of Dili, but it still seems determined to destroy everything in its wake. It's the continuation of a scorched earth policy that has done enormous damage not just to East Timor, but to the international reputation of Indonesia. Julian Mannion, ITN, Dili.
The polls closed an hour ago in the Hamilton South by-election brought about by the Defence Secretary George Robertson's elevation to the Lords and the top job in NATO. The count is well underway, with the result expected before midnight. Heavy rain in Lanarkshire contributed to a slow start to voting this morning, and the indications are of a low turnout. I'm joined now by our Scotland correspondent Linda Kennedy, who's at the count. So Linda, what are the latest indications?
Dermot, turnout is indeed the key to this by-election. The lower the number of people who got to the polls today, the higher the chances the SNP have of making inroads into Labour's fairly substantial majority, because they're much better at motivating their own supporters. And the weather has been on the nationalist side today, as you say, rather wet and windy, and of course that has the traditional detrimental effect on numbers of people who actually make their way to the polls. Now, the very latest figure we have on the turnout is 35%. That's low even for a by-election. You would think that would give the SNP a greater chance of success, but it looks as if the piles of votes for the Labour candidate are higher.
And Linda, when might we know the result for real?
Well, they can count fast here. It's a very tight geographical area. In fact, they're always one of the first constituencies to declare at a general election. The returning officer says we should know the result in about half an hour, so 11:30 at the latest.
Linda Kennedy, thanks a lot. There was also a parliamentary by-election today in Wigan in Greater Manchester because of the death last month of the Labour MP Roger Stott. The result there is expected soon after midnight. Charles Kennedy, the new leader of the Liberal Democrats, told them today the 21st century could belong to them. He said the Lib Dems were nobody's poodles and proceeded to attack Labour for being too timid on Europe and the Conservatives for being irresponsible on Northern Ireland. Here's our political editor, Michael Brunson. an empty platform at the start, so where was he? Charles Kennedy's lack of punctuality is notorious. Was this his little joke with conference? No, just a missed cue backstage. Once on stage, his favourite word was reconnect. Voters had to know where politicians stood.
Our future is not as a left of Labour party. That's been tried before. It was the longest suicide note in history, and for us it would be the political cul-de-sac of all time. I am not leading this party in that direction.
Mr. Kennedy spoke of his personal journey from a Highland crot to the House of Commons and now 16 years on to the leadership of his party, with an echo of David Steele's "Go home and prepare for government."
But 16 years on, the gap, I think, between leadership and government doesn't actually seem so great anymore. I'm ready for it, and I know you are. I won't let you down. Let's go and make a success of it together. Thanks a lot.
There was immediate approval from his predecessor, Paddy Ashdown, and a warm response from the conference as a whole, and from Mr. Kennedy's girlfriend, Sarah Girling, in particular. So the Liberal Democrats are going home after a very different kind of leader speech. It was almost like a quiet conversation with his own party, to which they responded very well, with some messages for the country along the way. No doubt, Charles Kennedy's personal crescendo will be apparent the closer the general election gets. Michael Brunson, ITN, Harrogate. Junior hospital doctors are expected to accept a new government offer on their working hours and pay tomorrow. The 11th hour deal comes on the eve of a threatened vote on industrial action. Under it, junior doctors would work no more than 56 hours a week over a 3-year period. The current pay system, which the doctors claim is unfair, would be scrapped, to be replaced by a more comprehensive junior doctor contract, which the government says should be more flexible and safer. The lead scientists who are behind the world's first ovary transplant cautioned today that it was too early to say how many might benefit from the technique. Nevertheless, it's being seen as a breakthrough which could revolutionize women's lives. Here's Helen Wright.
This is the pioneering operation that restored one woman's chance to have children. The success of Margaret Lloyd Hart's case holds out the prospect that other women like her who need their ovaries removed or who have an illness that threatens their fertility could still have children using their own eggs. The operation involved taking healthy tissue from her one remaining ovary before it was removed, tissue which could still produce eggs for a pregnancy. The tissue was then stored, frozen outside the body. At a later date, it was thawed and then transplanted back into Margaret's body, grafted onto the pelvic wall. The tissue was then stimulated with hormones, and it's now been revealed it's produced an egg. Researchers in Leeds who developed this technique spoke of their hopes for its future use.
This, we hope, will provide a window of opportunity for the woman to conceive. I do not believe that it will provide long-term normal cycles for many years.
This technique has so far only been used successfully once, but experts believe it does hold out genuine hope for women having treatment for cancer and the 100,000 British women who suffer premature menopause each year. Controversially, it's also raised the prospect of extending fertility beyond the menopause, though one expert isn't convinced it will help older women.
I'm cautious about its potential use for women in their 50s, 60s and 70s, as if it would give them the eternal youth. I'm sure it won't.
Scientists also say the real test for this technique will be to see if its first patient can go on to have a child. Helen Wright, ITN.
The last president of the Soviet Union, Mikhail Gorbachev, wept inconsolably today as his wife Raisa was buried in Moscow. They'd been married for more than 40 years when she died of leukemia on Monday. Kevin Dunn reports.
In pale autumn sunshine, they carried Raisa Gorbachev into Moscow's Novodevichy cemetery, her open coffin filled with flowers. Behind, Mikhail Gorbachev walked with the couple's only daughter, Irina. This is one of Moscow's most venerable cemeteries, a resting place for poets and politicians. Many of Russia's most famous names lie here, among them Nikita Khrushchev and the playwright Anton Chekhov. Mr. Gorbachev had never hidden the depth of his feelings for his wife. His grief at her loss today proved overwhelming. In post-Soviet Russia, the Gorbachevs had become widely unpopular. The qualities which attracted them to the West often resented at home. But public sympathy for the couple increased remarkably when it became known Raisa was suffering from leukemia. For many Russians, they have lost the only true First Lady they have ever had. Kevin Dunn, ITN, Moscow.
The Nationwide Building Society and Barclays Bank tonight appeared to have called a truce over cash points. The Nationwide had threatened to take Barclays to court over its decision to charge the Society's customers £1 for using Barclays cash points. Today the bank agreed to delay the charges and the Building Society said it would postpone legal action. Victims of one of Britain's worst cases of water poisoning did suffer considerable damage to their brain function, according to research out tomorrow. The British Medical Journal studied people affected by the leak of aluminium sulphate into water supplies in Camelford, North Cornwall, 11 years ago. It dismissed the original claim that their symptoms were caused by anxiety. The opening ceremonies of the Ryder Cup, the greatest team contest in golf, were performed tonight at the Brookline Country Club in Massachusetts. As Peter Staunton reports, the British and Europeans, the holders, will start tomorrow as definite underdogs.
It's the only time golfers ever play for their countries. Over the next 3 days, it's the best of Britain and Europe against the might of America. And the duel everyone was hoping for will take place right at the start. The 19-year-old Spanish prodigy Sergio Garcia head-to-head with Tiger Woods, the world's most exciting player. The Americans have been claiming they're way ahead of any of the opposition, an attitude which borders on arrogance, but it doesn't worry the European captain.
I'm not going to beat drums about how we're going to definitely win, but I think we have a good team. I think they're playing pretty well, and I think they're going to be hard to beat.
In past years, American crowds have gone way over the top to upset the Europeans, but so far they've been well behaved.
Crowd, especially in Oak Hill in 95, were fantastic, and Valderrama as well, and I don't foresee any problems this week at all.
Tonight's opening ceremony was a mixture of the quaint and the American golfing dream.
From Ponte Vedra Beach, Florida, Jim Furyk.
But tomorrow the smiles will be gone. The battle for the Ryder Cup will be underway. Peter Staunton, ITN Sport.
Some of the world's top rock stars met the Pope today to win his backing for the Jubilee 2000 campaign to mark the new millennium by cancelling Third World debt. The Pope's attendants introduced Bono of the Irish band U2 to his summer home at Castel Gandolfo. He was followed by Bob Geldof. Afterwards, they told a news conference the Pope had shown understanding and also a sense of humour.
He's a charming man, as well as a holy man. I told him he was also a great showman, whereupon he took my fly shades and put them on. The first funky pontiff, I thought to myself.
The headlines again. The commander of the UN peacekeeping force in East Timor said he needed more troops after shots were fired in Dili today by Indonesian troops, and the results of the Hamilton South and Wigan by-elections are due in the next hour. Now, tonight's financial figures. The FTSE 100 share index recovered some ground, closing up almost 56 points on the day. But on Wall Street, the Dow Jones kept falling, closing down more than 205 points, and the pound rose almost a cent against the dollar. Now for a look at tomorrow's papers. And the Daily Telegraph reports that the surgeons behind the world's first ovary transplant have carried out the same operation on a second infertile woman. Early results suggest that the surgery has produced eggs. The Times claims that Tony Blair is being asked to pay £45 a month towards his son's education because changes in government funding to the school have sparked a cash crisis. Its main picture is of the leading jockey, Frankie Dettori, who's admitted taking weight control drugs before the Jockey Club banned them. The Daily Mail also leads with the Blair school story. It says the headmaster has personally written to all parents asking for donations to prevent further cutbacks. The main photo is of Scary Spice making her catwalk debut. The Express leads on what it calls the victory for junior doctors as they look set to accept the government's latest offer on improved working conditions. And the Mirror claims Tony Blair has made a personal plea to Manchester United to reconsider its plans not to take part in next year's FA Cup. And that's it from us. The ITV Evening News is at 6:30 tomorrow, and we're back at 11. Until then, goodbye.